Here we have an example function in Python, and we'll look at how this is laid out. We'll look at the anatomy of a function. In other words, how Python knows we want to create this reusable block of code as a function. So, first of all, we've got our def keyword. That's a reserved keyword in Python. Whenever we use that, Python knows, a function will follow this. So def, in other words, defining a function. So that's important. That's necessary. And after the def keyword, we have our function name. We can name this whatever we'd like. In this instance, our function is named myFunction. We then have parentheses. Let me back up a bit. So we have our function name and parentheses, and then a colon. Kind of like our loops or if-else statements like we talked about earlier. A colon, as we can tell, is a big part of Python. So we have our function name, our parentheses. Within our parentheses, we don't need them. It depends on how our function's written. We can have what are called parameters. And these are inputs to the function. If you remember our analogy about the factory, we input raw goods into the factory. Well, we can input things into our function, into this block of code here. Line 1, line 2, line 3. This is our function. So parameters are those inputs. Then we have our function body, everything that's indented within our function, at least one level. Under the def keyword, this define keyword, is our function body. This is what will actually occur when we call the function, when we run the function, which we'll do down below in this code. We have a return value here, and functions don't need to return values, but often the case is that we want to send something back. So if we have our factory, we send in some inputs, stuff happens in the function, and then we give back some outputs. That's what the return statement does. It gives back the outputs to the rest of our program wherever we call our function. Which brings us to the next point about calling or invoking our function. In order to do that, all we need to do is specify the function name and supply these arguments, 2 and 3. Those will become myparam1, myparam2. And we'll talk about the difference between arguments and parameters in an upcoming lecture. But for now, understand that when we call the function, when we're telling Python execute this function, we supply those arguments there. Whereas when we define the function, we're just saying this is how the function is built. It's built as taking some parameters. So it needs those parameters to work. So that's the anatomy of a function. And we see here on line 6, we're assigning new var, a new variable. We're assigning that to the output of my function. In other words, the return supplies the output. So in this instance, and we'll take a look at this here in a minute, myparam1 plus myparam2 will be returned as the output of our function and assigned, in this case, to new var. And then if we print new var, the result will be 5.